Welcome, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order, and before we start, our CEO would like to have a few words.
Sure. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Although she's been here for several weeks already and kind of introduced at a rezoning meeting we had in Colchester a few weeks back, I am pleased to formally introduce Ms. Lori Chadwick as a welcome addition to the position of Director of Development Services. So she most recently served as Director for U.S. Property Department for the Windsor Bridge Housing Authority. Previously held the positions of Manager of Planning and Development with the Town of Kingsville and Planner with the City of Detroit. She has over 18 years experience in urban and regional land use planning. And it is exciting that she's going to help guide development and maintain the momentum that we already have here in the town of Essex. I can tell you in the short time that she's been here, her passion and her focus on her team and her department has definite noticeable positive impact. So, welcome.
Welcome, Lori. And we'll move on. Is there any conflict of interest amongst council members tonight? Seeing none, Councillor, did you have a notice of motion you'd like to make?
Yes.
You want to make it now?
Yeah, so adoption of published agenda.
Oh, yeah, we have to do the adoption of published agenda first. Have a mover, please. Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Guerin, all in favor? And at this point here, we can move for the notice of motion. Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Normally, she would give the full wording of her notice of motion at the appropriate, I think it's item 15, I think, in the agenda. But we've adopted.
But you want to put us on notice that you're making one?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
.1 on the agenda, adoption of minutes, that the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 3rd, 2019 be adopted as circulated.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Vandendoe and Councillor Bowman. Any questions? All in favor? It's carried.
5.2, that the minutes of the special council meeting held May 23rd, 2019 be adopted as circulated.
Mover, please. Moved by Councillor Bjorkman. Councillor Verbeek, any questions? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
And 5.3, that the minutes of the special council meeting of May 28th, 2019 also be adopted as circulated.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Bjorkman and Deputy Mayor Malash. Any questions on this one? All in favor? It's carried. And we'll move right into public presentations. And the first one is Mike Cowan from BDO. And that's for our financial statements. Welcome, Mike.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. As mentioned, I'm the partner from BDO Canada for the audit. I've been doing this for several years now, so as usual, I like to always thank the team who's assisted us get through the audit process. So Jeff and Kate, who I understand just has another child as of Saturday, so congrats to her. And Heather and the rest of the team, thanks for your assistance. As most of you probably know, audits aren't always fun, but it is part of making sure the statements are appropriate. So what we're going to do, I'm not going to go through page by page, line by line, but I'm going to go through what I think are the highlights, and I'll take questions, and where they're more operational in nature, Jeff and Heather can help answer those types of questions. So I'm going to jump to the audit report. So it's page 2 and 3 of our PDF, and up on the screen there is the first page of that. And I want to make special note here that the audit report has once again changed. So what they're trying to do is provide a little more clarity with what we do versus what management does. It's very similar. It hasn't changed how we audit. It's just trying to be a little bit more clear and specific. So the first section there, our opinion, is right up front. It used to be near the bottom. So now our opinion is stated clearly at the top, and essentially it's saying in all material respects, the statements are considered presented fairly for 2018. The next paragraph speaks to the basis of the opinion. So how did we come about getting the work we need in our file to confirm, to give our audit opinion? So we can't obviously test every transaction, but we do a series of analytics and different tests to get comfort and to be able to provide our opinion. The next section speaks to the responsibilities of management. So ultimately it does say that the statements are responsibility of management of the town. So we do assist with preparation of the statements, but we do that, and then the staff of the town go through them and make sure that they're comfortable with them, come to mutual acceptance of the statements, and then we bring them to you for your approval. And the second page lists out our responsibilities, and again, just trying to be as much clarity as possible in terms of how we assess risk and internal controls that we review to go through and see that they're functioning properly. And then ultimately concluding as to whether or not we can provide an opinion and giving our opinion. Again, our opinion stated at the beginning, and it's stating that the statements are acceptable from our perspective. You'll note that the date of the report is today. Ultimately, council's approval will accept the statements. These are in draft, and I think we're still waiting on maybe 2 legal letters. So once we get those, 1 legal letter, okay. Once we have that, it's just confirmation that some things that you deal with lawyers with respect to, that our understanding of them are correct. There's nothing sticking out in the financial statements with respect to that, so we don't expect any issues. Once we have that, then we can go to final. So I'm going to slip to the next page, which is the consolidated statement of financial position, which is, for all intents and purposes, the balance sheet. And I know there are some new faces on council, so I'm not going to go into too much depth, but I'll try to give you enough to make sure it makes some sense. So about several years ago, we switched to what's called PSAV accounting, so public sector accounting, and to show all of the assets of the town on the balance sheet. That's similar to a for-profit entity or someone wasn't using PSAV accounting prior to the change. So you'll see at the top there's financial assets and then financial liabilities and then non-financial assets. And the non-financial assets is the tangible capital assets, so roads, vehicles, buildings, equipment, etc. And when that was set up years ago, it was done to try to do best to capture the assets at that time and what they had been depreciated down to. And then going forward from that, anything new that was added has been depreciated. So there's notes that explain how things are depreciated over time. And you're going to note that there's a very large surplus at the bottom of $220 million. And again, as I always just like to point out at this meeting, that's not a cash surplus, that's an asset surplus. So a huge part of that is the $186 million of assets under the town's watch. So there is obviously cash in the bank. If we jump back up to the top, the cash is a significant part of the financial assets of almost $47 million. And just going down the list, there's taxes receivable, different receivables, the investment in ELK, and then also the long-term investment is Union Water. On financial liability side, there's obviously going to be some things outstanding at year end. There's the employee future benefits, which is a $4.4 million number. And then net long-term debt. There was some new debt in the year, but it was internally financed, so we removed that for these statement purposes. This is only showing external debt. So if you have a debt owing to your own reserve, we don't show that in these statements. Okay. So overall, net financial assets of about $34.5 million, and I mentioned the surplus before. So if you flip to the next page, this is the consolidated statement of operations and accumulated surplus. In essence, this is the income statement. So previous one balance sheet, this one the income statement. This shows you the activity for the year, but a reminder that this is using PSAB. So it's trying to show you as best on an accrual basis, use of assets basis, what the financial picture looks like. There is a note later on, and I'll point it out, that explains you guys pass a budget that's based on typical cash operations, how you want to spend money for capital, for operations, what goes into reserves comes out of reserves. And basically that gets restated for PSAP purposes to factor in capital assets. It's very common among all municipalities to continue budgeting the way you always have because it kind of makes sense in terms of spending money. So there's 3 columns here. The first column shows what was budgeted, and then the second column is what actually happened, and the third column is the prior year, what actually happened. So I won't get into too many of the lines, but you'll see that you budgeted for $37 million of revenue. It ended up being about $41 million. You'll see a few numbers don't have budget lines, and that's consistent with how you budget, but recovered drain billings was something that was looked at very closely during the year, and so that obviously that number will have a large impact as to the differences. And then in the expenses are broken down by the different groups: general government, protection of property and persons, etc. Overall, expenses were fairly in line with budgeting, as you can see from the 34 million versus 34.4. And overall, there's a surplus over and above, but again, it's not necessarily a cash surplus. It's a surplus for these accounting purposes, for public sector accounting purposes. And that was higher than the budget, but again, there's some things that were not budgeted for. Another one I'll point out is ELK. You never budget for exactly what ELK is going to provide, your share, which is 100%, but that's just consistent with normal budgeting because you're not banking on that. You're going with what you are fairly confident in what you know of. The next page, statement of changes in net financial assets. So this takes the surplus we just saw and adjusts for capital activity. So what I'll point out there is you had budgeted for significant capital assets, and some of those were deferred as the number was significantly lower. And that's just a matter of timing as to when projects can get completed. For various reasons, things get pushed off. So again, not a plus or minus, just showing the activity of what's happening. The last page before I start kind of going through a little bit quicker is the statement of cash flows. So again, this shows you your surplus and then what changes among the balance sheet or the financial statement accounts are causing that to get from your cash balance in the prior year to the current year. So this will tell you things again like what you've acquired in terms of tangible capital assets. It'll tell you what the change in ELK was. It'll tell you how much debt you repaid. And again, it doesn't show debt issued internally or repaid internally. That's a movement from reserves essentially. So just to point that out. Other than that, it's plus or minuses in terms of the balance sheet accounts. Maybe I'll just pause there, or should I just keep going?
Any questions from council so far? Councillor Vandenno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure there's a simple answer, but why was planning and development back on page 5? Yeah, it's 50% over budgeted. What was the reason for that?
Gonna let Jeff speak to that.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Through the chair. Planning and development, drainage department falls under there. So drainage projects aren't budgeted for in the annual budget process because they're user pay. So all those projects fall into that, and there was a spike in 2000.
I remember this now. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So the next several pages are notes to explain some of the numbers we've just gone through. Again, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but the first several pages are just a summary of how we account for certain things. So it speaks to how we consolidate ELK, how we account for tax revenue, deferred revenue, tangible capital assets I mentioned on page 11 shows how we amortize things. When we get into page 12, we start seeing more of the explanatory notes. So those previous 5 or 6 pages I just went through are explaining how we do things. This may have a little more detail to a number you see on the statements. So again, there's some more info on the ELK investment and the ELK statements and activity between yourselves and ELK. After that, in note 3 is equity in Union Water Supply System. And again, it's more information. basically a lot of this summarizes to one number that shows up on the financials, but has a lot of other information that would help the reader in going through the statements essentially. Get through to the next few notes, more in the debt area, so showing that long-term debt, and we've broken this down for several years by user fee supported debt, which is about 9 million of the total. Property tax supported debt, which is about $11.7 million worth of the total. And then the debt relating to the two items benefiting property owners. And there's several of those adding up to most of the difference, along with the share of Union Water. And then again, as I mentioned a few times, on page 17, we back out the internally financed debt, which again is just borrowing from your reserves to do certain things. And then a detailed breakdown of the debt repayments over the next several years. As we continue on, we have some notes talking about monies you've collected on behalf, taxes you've collected on behalf of the school boards in the County of Essex. Note 7 breaks down your accumulated surplus, how it's kind of represented based on sort of if you were to look at the old PSAB rules. And specifically 7B talks to the reserves to show that you have about $50 million in reserves set aside. And it breaks it down a little bit in terms of capital, the landfill, contingencies, etc. Going a little further on, we have some details on deferred revenue, then also employee future benefits. Every few years, an actuarial study is done, and one was done in 2017, and then the normal practice is to kind of redo that every 3 years. So they give you an update as to what's happened based on the full study done last year. As we move on to page 22, there's some public sector salary disclosure, so the sunshine list that gets disclosed every spring. I mentioned earlier in note 13 the budget note. So it basically goes through the budget that was approved by council and shows the adjustments that it takes to get to that surplus number we saw. And actually that number's, it's incorrect, so we need to tweak that. The issue is the new debt issued includes budgeted debt internally, so I have to take that out, and that will then balance to what it should be. Which is one of the positives of coming to council with drafts, so sorry about that. On the next few pages, we get through to the consolidated schedule of tangible capital assets. So we see a breakdown by different type of asset. We see land, buildings, vehicles, etc. It shows the total at the beginning of the year, additions and disposals, and how much we amortize those items based on what we saw earlier as the policy. There's a schedule for the current year, and there's a schedule for the prior year. And then we have some segment disclosure to take the income statement and break it down by those segments. Again, this was more common when we saw the old PSAP statements, so just giving a little bit more information because a lot of people are still used to that and used to the old budgeting, and many, as I said, still budget that way. So, and finally, we get through to the trust funds, which is a very small portion but still required. And the trust funds that are on essentially are not town assets but are held in trust. It's about $355,000 worth of assets. Again, not huge dollars in terms of what we've just been talking about, but an additional reporting that's not part of your statements but separate, and there's a separate report to go along with that. So I've gone through sort of what I think are the highlights. Hopefully I didn't go into too much detail, but just enough. And we'll see if there's any further questions.
Any other questions from council? No questions? Do you see any? Oh, Councillor Bjorkman.
Needed a drink first. Thank you very much for the presentation and the budget. I do my best to read this every year and follow as best I can. One of the things that was brought up, though, was our employee future benefits. Do we fund those through a reserve, or is that just a budget line every year? Or is there a fund that's set up as people are employed here and we know there's going to be a future debt to us? Is there money set aside for that to accumulate and maybe someday, generate most of its own fund?
Do you want to speak to that, or you want me to? So every year there's a cost to go in to pay for benefits, but that liability itself is not currently being funded for. Or there's no reserve to cover that.
Any other questions? Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great work to our BDO partner and our staff as well. I think our financial health is one of the assets that we have in our municipality. I've always been very proud of it, and our previous CAO and Director of Finance did a great job, and Mr. Morrison and his team are continuing on that path. So as I read it thoroughly, but I really trust you here. It's really good. There are some things I would like to have a hard copy, please, put in my mailbox one day, so, because I do like to highlight it, and I like to keep it, and I'm trying to get a good filing system at home in a desk. And when you have everything on here, it's hard to keep track year after year, but if I have a hard copy, then I can stick it in there. I don't know if, Mr. Morrison, if you know what our overall cost for protection to persons and people, if our OPP number can be separated out, and if our fire department can be separated out, just so I could see and keep track on a year-to-year how much the OPP contract is costing us. And I know it's probably in our budget too, but I'd like to have that number, just because I think there's some changes coming on the horizon with OPP, and I want to really make sure that we're starting this council on top of things.
I can actually speak to that. In note 11 on page 22, it says some of the significant contractual obligations you have. It talks to the OCWA, and then the last paragraph speaks to the police services. So it was about 3.3 million for 2018. It shows the comparative number too. No
Okay,
problem.
any other questions from council? No other questions? Thank you very much, Mike, for the report.
Thank you.
I need a motion to adopt it in principle, please. Can I have a mover? Councillor Vandendolen, a seconder. Councillor Guerin, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
On the agenda, Planning Report 2019-25, Woodview Estates Subdivision Extension of Draft Plan Approval for receipt, and that council approves a 3-year extension of the draft plan of subdivision until July 24th, 2022, and that administration accordingly be directed to notify the manager of planning services for the County of Essex concerning the town's support for the extension of the draft plan approval.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Bowman. Councillor Bjorkman, any questions on this one? All in favor? Thank you. It's carried.
8.2, Planning 2019-35, rezoning application, Noah Homes, east side of County Road 13, south of Pollard Drive in Ward 3. This is in conjunction with Bylaw 1829, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 1037. That said report be received, that council approves the rezoning of the lands so described from A1.1 to HR 2.2 with the incorporation of supplementary provisions for a reduced exterior side yard and an increase in the permitted width of an attached garage accessory to a dwelling or dwelling unit. That the removal of the H holding provision be made conditional on approval of a draft plan of subdivision and the execution of a subdivision agreement, and that bylaw 1829 accordingly receive 3 readings this evening.
Have a mover, please. Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Bjorkman. Any questions on this one? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
8.3, Building Report 2019-05, May 2019 Building Report, together with the development and overview for receipt this evening by council.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Vandendolen, seconder. Councillor Bjorkman. Any questions on this one? All in favor? Councillor. Comment. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Bjorkman.
Thank you. It's a very good report. We're looking at, it's important to trumpet when things are rolling and things are building. There are lots of things happening, not just with new homes. We've doubled the amount of new home permits that have come out, but we've also got a lot of fence building, a lot of pools, a lot of sheds, a lot of additions going on, which shows we're not just building new homes, but people that are here are staying here. They're improving their area, and they're improving our town, so very good reflection of what's happening in the town right now. So thanks for that report.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Van Andel.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, this, it's about development, but it relates back to 8, the Woodview Estates, the extension there. I just drove through there on the way here tonight. Are we expecting that the rest of that's going ahead in the near future? Is that why we're giving them this 3-year extension? Because it seems as though the last lots have now been built out on what's there.
Jeff?
I'm just curious.
Yeah, can Rita answer this, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Vanderdolen, that's the hope, that it will get up above, up and going soon. The draft plan extension just allows them to continue with the development without having to go through the whole plan of subdivision process again.
Could you tell me how many homes are in that last piece? Just approximately.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's really a toss-up because it's going to be a mix of densities, singles, semis, and townhomes.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, I could say that our planning department has been very busy. I echo what Councillor Bjorkman says. We are really in the right direction here as a town. So thank you very much for the planning department. You guys are working very, very hard. Thank you. Sorry about that. We need a vote. All in favor? It's carried.
8.4, Corporate Services 2019-004, Asset Management Policy, that said report be received this evening and that the Asset Management Policy dated June 17, 2019 be approved and adopted.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Verbeek, seconder. Councillor Bondi, any questions on this one? Councillor Bjorkman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to Mr. Morrison, looking at the dates that have been imposed by the upper levels of government where our phases have to come in, what phase are we at right now, and how are we doing against that schedule?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. Currently, with the adoption of this policy, we'll be compliant with the July 1st, 2019. However, I'd like to also note that we are also compliant with the July 1st, 2021, July 1st, 2023, and July 1st, 2024.
Are you all set there, Councillor? Okay. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
8.5, Planning 2019-33, Site-Specific Zoning Amendment at 152 Adelaide Street, Colchester South. And this is together with Bylaw 1828, being a bylaw to amend 1037. That said report be received, that said report be received for Council's information, and that Bylaw 1828 and be read, receive 3 readings this evening and be finally passed.
Can I have a mover on this one, please? Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Guerin. Any questions on this one? All in favor? Oh, pardon me, Councillor Bjorkman.
I did my breathing exercises before I came tonight. I just want to take a couple of minutes. We had a number of residents that came out to our open house that were concerned with this, and that they had different concerns which were concerns to them. We had people worried about, will this become a rental? You're going to have 3 or 4 cars in 2 different driveways instead of 1 driveway, as opposed to doing a single-family dwelling. Does it fit their neighborhood? They all would prefer a single-family home. But we did have conversations, and it really came to why. What is your concern? And the biggest thing that came from it was going to be traffic, that they were worried that there would be 3 more cars over there, and, there would be 6 instead of 3. So, that concern really becomes alleviated when you look at how often people are actually going to be pulling in and out of their driveway, and how long does it take to just get them around the corner? The other was, having the two garages facing out to the road. But if you walk down that street, the water side of Adelaide, all you see are garages facing the road. So it's not that it doesn't fit. The design that the people want to put in is beautiful, fits the neighborhood, and so we did have those conversations, and I told them that I would be supporting this, and just wanted to make sure, they wanted to make sure I voiced their concerns, that they were heard at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions on this one? All in favor? It's carried. I think this is a good project too, Councillor Bjorkman.
8.6, Planning 2019-34, amendments to the Town of Essex signed bylaw. That said report be received, and that council authorize the giving of notice of council's intention to consider amendments to bylaw 1350, the Town of Essex signed bylaw, in order to incorporate provisions for the removal of abandoned signs.
Have a mover on this one, please. Councillor Guerin and Councillor Verbeek. Any questions on this one? All in favor? It's carried.
.7, Planning 2019-36, Townsview Estates partial release of securities. That said report be received, and that a partial release of securities for the Townsview Estates subdivision totaling 167,463.83 be granted.
Have a mover, please. Need a mover. Councillor Bowman and Councillor Van Dolen. All in favor? It's carried.
Item 9 on the agenda, any reports from our youth members this evening?
Through your worship, I'd like to report that Essex District High School Relay for Life made $12,300.
Wow, very good. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to bring to the attention that some people on the Facebook page Essex Ontario are trying to organize a town-wide yard sale. So I don't know if you guys are aware of the Cottam yard sales, but that's something my family really likes to go to every year, and I think that everybody knows it's the first weekend of June. So the residents are proposing to make it July 13th to 14th, so it's the weekend, I believe, after the Fun Fest. So I think it'd be really good if we were to advertise this, and it could bring lots of people to Essex that they wouldn't otherwise come to Essex, and they can discover all of the different shops we have and the different restaurants we have, and I think it'd just be a good community event for us. So I was just hoping if maybe we could pass a motion and designate this weekend as Essex Yard Sales and hopefully do some advertising. Thank you.
Doug, would you like to comment on that?
Through your worship, thanks for the question. Similar to Cottam Yard Sale, it's basically facilitated through the residents. However, I have seen it on Facebook too, and we can work with our manager of corporation or communications if there's any flyers or if we have more information, and definitely help support it, because you're right, it'll bring more people to our town. Right now, I've only seen it through social media, so I'm not sure if it's actually occurring or not.
Thank you, Doug. Any other questions? Thank you. Motion to receive the report, please. Councillor Bowman and Councillor Van Dolen. All in favor? Carried.
Item 10, any updates from County Council this evening?
I haven't got anything. Do you, Deputy Mayor Malash?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll just quickly and let maybe council know what's going on for this coming meeting. We've got one of the more interesting things is going to be release of a County Road 22 corridor study. So they're looking at continuous expansion of County Road 22 so that residents of the county can just quickly get into and connect to EC Row in the city of Windsor, and thereby go from one end of the county on the northern half of the county from one end of the county to the other. There's nothing specific to the town of Essex, but their tender for their hot mix overlay is coming out, and it's $4.7 million, if anybody's interested in that. But they have their financial reports that are going to be coming out this week as well, and we're going to be reviewing our procurement policy as well this Wednesday night. So if you're looking for something exciting to do Wednesday night, you might want to come out to County Council and help us do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
11.1, correspondence to be received, that all of the correspondence listed in agenda item 11.1 be received and where indicated to further share using suitable methods of communication.
Have a mover on this one? Deputy Mayor Milosh and Councillor Bowman. All in favor? It's carried. Go ahead.
Thank you. I see that our Essex, Windsor Essex Solid Waste Authority has their regional landfill operations report on there again. And I did send a couple emails asking staff some questions today, but our staff really don't have the ability to answer some of these questions. You know, my questions are always the same. Auto shredder fluff, is there a correlation between tonnage and the amount of auto shredder fluff? Because it seems like some months there's a lot of auto shredder fluff and there's not a correlate. To me, I'm no mathematician though, no correlation to the amount of waste. So I'd really like to see if they're using auto shredder fluff just for cover. I'd really like to see a correlation between a lot of waste, a lot of cover, or a little bit of waste, a little bit of cover. So I really believe that we should invite them in the future to be here to present the report, because there are some good there are some good numbers in there. I do have other questions, but we can't answer them, right? Because they're not here. For example, you know, can they give us more data on how many more years we have with the landfill? These are all questions that we really need to have a long leadway on it. Do we have 30 more years for our landfill? Do we have 15? Both of those are really, we need to know. As a region, we really need to know. And also, I believe in the past, after we've received this, we've sent it out to other municipalities, because I believe that LaSalle should have it, and Tecumseh should have it, and Kingsville, because that when this landfill closes, who knows where the next one's going to be, right? So just having that relationship with them and seeing, you know, talking to them about our waste diversion, talking to them about, you know, just building that relationship. Can we ever look at harnessing the gas? You know, what are some options that we can look at? It's really hard to ask questions to if we ask questions to our staff have to go back and ask questions to them, and it's tying up their time when really delegations from the Essex Windsor Solid Waste Authority should be here addressing. I do have a little bit of experience on this file because I was on the landfill liaison committee before, and I do see that in 2018 the amount of auto shredder fluff did go down from 2017. So I'm happy to see that. I also think internally we should start keeping a chart of that auto shredder fluff. I've asked, like, I probably asked 10 times by now for a history of the auto shredder fluff since 2010 to now, and I can't seem to pull that data out of there, but maybe if they came, we could ask them.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Milosh.
Thank you. So I'm on the landfill liaison committee as well as Councillor Verbeek, and Councillor Verbeek's actually the chair of the committee. But I've been on the committee for the last 16 years, and Councillor Bondi, I know you've been on the committee with me as well for several years. And this shredder fluff question actually came up probably about 8 years ago or 9 years ago now. And it was one of the residents that were on the committee that actually brought it up and mentioned, why is there so much shredder fluff coming in now as coverage? So it doesn't count as their tonnage that they pay, that the Essex Windsor Solid Waste would pay dollars to the town of Essex, because it's coverage. They count it coverage, not tonnage being brought into the landfill. They're using it for a purpose. And so going back 8 years ago, Councillor Bondi and myself brought it up to this council, and we wanted to go to a lawyer and find out if there were regulations as to what percent of shredder fluff was the correct amount to allow for coverage. Because if there's nothing in the contract that says specifically how much they can use for coverage, they can probably bring in as much as they want. So there were times, went back 8 years ago, where 25% of all the tonnage brought in was shredder fluff. And that's the reason why we were questioning, is this appropriate? The Essex Windsor Solid Waste is actually making a revenue from it. It's very small revenue, but they're making a revenue from it. It's not at the same rate that they charge for regular garbage to come into the landfill. It's quite a bit cheaper, but they're saying they need it. It's in place of using clay, and they would have to purchase the clay. And it's actually not as good of a seal as what the shredder fluff is. So that's the Essex Windsor Solid Waste side of the story. And they're never going to come to us, Councillor Bondi, and say, oh, we're taking way too much shredder fluff, because they're actually getting a revenue on it instead of paying out money. So it kind of works out good. It's just a matter of what's the appropriate amount of shredder fluff. And you're never going to hear Essex Windsor Solid Waste say they're using more than what they need to use. We'd have to prove that that's the case. So we'd have to take it on ourselves, that task, if we wanted to. There's a lot of information that you can get off their website. It takes a lot of digging, because there's a lot of information out there. If we wanted numbers, I believe the Essex Windsor Solid Waste would have no problem through the Landfill Liaison Committee to send that out to anybody that wants the information. We can perhaps have them request that they come once a year to give us a presentation. And I think because we're the host of the landfill, they may be more willing to come out and do that. I don't think that they'd be willing to go to every council, because that's a lot of work, or even to do it quarterly. I think you'd have to have them come once a year and maybe present some information, but I think we'd have to have some questions to them as well if we wanted them to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Verbeek.
Okay, through you, Your Worship, thank you. Definitely on this issue, Councillor Bondi, I line up with your thoughts on this. And actually, Mr. Nepsey and I just recently spoke. He will be meeting with Tom Marentet, and I had expressed my thoughts then that we should at least once a year have the operations manager here to just do a little Q&A with us as the host community. As far as the shredder fluff, you know from your days back on the committee when we were on it together, not just myself, but all the other landfill liaison committee members have concerns about the content of the shredder fluff, because they can't tell us clearly what's all in it, because it is everything. Currently, it's generating revenue for the landfill, as Deputy Mayor said, $8 a ton, and they are under contract for 40,000 to 60,000 tons a year. The reason you're not seeing it correlate with the amount of landfilling they're doing, the operations at the time, is because they're just, like I say, it's under contract. They're taking it, and the cover is not always consistent. Some days they may cover 4 inches, some days they may put 8 inches, depending on the odorous, the type of waste they're trying to cover. They've repeated over and over that it's much easier for operations to work with than the clay. Clearly, at this time of year, the operations over there would be a nightmare if they were trying to cover daily with clay only. That's why they prefer the porous auto shredder fluff to work with, and because it generates considerable revenue for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Bondi's idea that the landfill operators come and talk to us is a good idea. I have some questions too raised by this report. And if viewers don't know, shredder fluff is when they chew up a car and it's all the pieces of plastic and stuffing in the seats and everything that's not metal that can't be recycled. And I think it includes the glass. But as far as I know, we don't have an automotive shredder operation left in Essex County. So is this stuff being imported from outside the county? Is it coming in from the States? I mean, this is of interest to me. And in this executive report, like it mentions that there are heightened levels of xylene in the leachate. You know, I mean, xylene is an industrial solvent. It shouldn't, I mean, they count how many tires and batteries they tried to sneak in, but to them, the xylene is a mystery, and to me, that's a bigger issue. You know, maybe that's leaching out of the fluff, I don't know. But yeah, this report generates a lot of questions that I'd like to put them to them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Verbeek.
Through you, Your Worship. Yeah, all of the shredder fluff comes from outside of Essex County. It was a question I asked at the last meeting.
From where, Councillor, do you know?
Yeah.
Where?
Kent.
Chatham, Kent area? Okay, thank you. Yep, okay.
11.2.1, that the Heritage Committee member resignation be received with regret, and that the appropriate letter of appreciation be sent together with updating of Schedule A to Bylaw 1777. Item 12, that the committee meeting minutes listed in agenda item 12, together with the recommendation, or together with any recommendations noted therein, be received and adopted as circulated.
Mover, please. Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Verbeek. Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
Item 15, 15.1.1, notices of motion. The following notice of motion was originally presented at the June 3rd regular council meeting and is being brought forward for consideration this evening. Deputy Mayor Malash, that council requests a report from the Director of Community Services in which the report would offer potential solutions to eliminate and/or minimize, combat bullying and foul language currently being experienced in the parks within the municipality of the town of Essex, as moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, and would need a seconder.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
Please and thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a few ideas that I have, and I'll just throw them out there that I'd like to present to so that administration knows kind of what we're looking for in the report. I believe that they probably already know. I've had a discussion with Mr. Sweet, our Director of Community Services already, and we're on the same page as far as what we might want to see in this report. So one of the things was a stepped up social media campaign, and this can be done pretty quickly and with very little cost. There's probably some cost attached to it, but very little cost. So that's one thing that could potentially happen. Request more police presence, a second step. And from what I've heard from different residents, and I think on Facebook posts and so on, I think that we've already seen that happening. Our police department was unaware that this was going on. So I question, like the residents should have been calling it in. And which leads me to another thing. I think we should be encouraging our residents to step forward. We don't want to see any vigilante groups going out and taking care of the problem themselves. We want the police to be able to do this themselves. But we do request that we have the help of residents in reporting these incidences when they happen, and in a timely manner as well, because that's the best time to have the police try and get to the situation. Signage is another thing. I've mentioned signage in my previous conversations about this. Perhaps added to the curfew signs, but maybe administration could come up with some ideas on how they'd want to handle it, whether they'd want to have additions onto the signs that are already there, the posts that are there with signs, or whether they'd just like to go forward with new signs and what that would cost us. And I would also like to see the non-emergency police phone number publicized at the parks as well. And I'm saying parks, but when I was talking with Mr. Sweet, he said, there's more than just parks where this could happen, and I never had really thought about it until that point. But I think we should be looking at making this inclusive of any recreational facilities that we have, parks being one of the recreational facilities that we're talking about.
So any record, it could be arenas, it could be skateboarding parks, anything that's recreational activities in the town of Essex that we have facilities for. I don't know if we need to put in place an anti-bully bylaw, but that's something that I'd like administration to review, look at what other communities are doing that have experienced this type of thing and wanted to put it into it. But that's kind of my ideas going forward. And perhaps some of our council members have other ideas that they'd like to put forward. So that's my ideas, and I'll leave it at that. I am looking for support on having administration bring back a report with summarizing and what we have as ideas that we'd like to see put into the report, and coming back perhaps in July sometime to let us know what we should be moving forward on. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Verbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Malash, for bringing this forward. Very timely. I do want to say that you're right on with the direction that we're seeing it going. The mayor, myself, and the police service board brought this to the chief and to our staff sergeant at the beginning of June meeting, and that was exactly some of the things the comments they made, that this non-emergency number needs to be used, which most of us don't even know or have, handy access to, and that they were receiving no reports of any of this kind of activity. So we need to encourage families and the young people that are experiencing it to call, because automatically we think, the police are just for emergency. We were assured when we had the conversation that they aren't receiving the reports, but they would definitely like as many as they, as they could to follow up on. And yeah, the non-emergency number, we have to get out there apparently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Malash, or Deputy Mayor Malash, for raising this. I think you've actually done an excellent job spearheading the initiative right now, because I've asked some of the families, and they said they've seen police and that it's already kind of taken care of itself. So that's good. Awareness is one thing, right? I was trying to get caught up on newspaper articles, and it says the federal minister speaks about positive impact of Crime Stoppers, empower witnesses and victims and citizens to take back control, right? Just by having your cell phone out, taking cameras. I also read in the Coam Park minutes that we had some damage there at Coam Park, so we've put up cameras in there. So I think there are a couple of steps we can take. What I feel is we keep reverting back to, and this is in McGregor, and this is in Harrow, and this is in Essex, is a lack of a relationship with our OPP that we used to have. I'll say it. I really do feel that way. When we hired the staff sergeant position, I really thought that we would have a relationship with council. I don't even know who the staff sergeant is right now. There's really a disconnect. Like, I was notified on the weekend over the Tully Meadows cat issue with people, and they said police came from Leamington. So, like, that's kind of, our police are coming from Leamington. So I don't even understand how policing in our municipality works right now. And my fear is it's going to get more convoluted going forward with the changes in contracts. So when we hired that position, I remember Councillor Kexero at the time, we were talking about it, having a member from our OPP at council twice a year, building that relationship. Problem areas. For example, I don't know if you hear about it still, Mr. Mayor, the third concession in Harrow. I get complaints about semi-trucks and speeding on that constantly, and we can't seem to stop it. We can't seem to get some of these uncontrollable issues in control, and I do think this is a policing issue. I think the signs will help. I'd like to see the OPP out on their bikes more. I do remember buying them bikes in the past. I don't remember how much they're even out on their bikes, but that's something that I would like to see. And then, if this doesn't work, we go down we threaten to go down the camera road, or I don't know. I like the bullying policy too. It can't hurt. Like, we have a loitering policy, and maybe we can tie it into something like that. The point is I really feel like we're missing a relationship with the OPP.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? If I just may, to Councillor Bondi, I see your point on the third concession about speeding and that and trucks and that. But we got to remember one thing, the police can't be there 24 hours a day. They can't. I see police on the third, I see police on the fourth. Just the other day in their SUV, their unmarked SUV with radar. I mean, they can't be there 24 hours a day. We can't expect that. But I see your point, and I thought the situation was getting a lot better. And I see that young officer out there, I'm not going to say his name, but whenever I see him, we speak about speeding on the third and fourth and the fifth concession, and I see radar up there quite a few times. Matter of fact, Councillor Vanendol and I, that one day they were sitting in that oil where the pumper was there. And so they're there, but they can't be there 24 hours a day. We can't expect that. So, thank you. Yeah, we need a motion to accept that? No? There is a motion. There is a motion. All in favor of the motion? It's carried. Thank you.
15.1.2, as added during adoption of published agenda this evening, is a notice of motion for presentment only with return for council's consideration at the July 2nd meeting. Said notice of motion from Councillor Bondi this evening.
Councillor Bondi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That council discuss how to make improvements to the trap neuter release program, perhaps magnets, signage, public education.
Thank you.
Item 16 on the agenda, any reports and announcements from council members?
None for me this evening, thank you.
Councillor Guerin?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Essex Fun Fest is coming up July 4th through 7th. As always, we're looking for volunteers. Don't have to be there the whole weekend, even if it's just an hour or 2 hours of the weekend, that would be appreciated. You can email volunteer@essex.ca. You can also visit the website, which is essexfunfest.com. You can visit the volunteer page. We're also asking any businesses or anybody that would like to participate in our parade, which is Saturday the 5th, to also go on our website and fill out that application and get them in. Ahead of the game, we had our last meeting, seems to be sponsorships, and we have a really good committee this year, lots of people on it, lots of great ideas, and like I say, we're ahead of where we were last year with respect to the majority of the festival. So, but yeah, as usual, volunteers needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Verbeek?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to plug the COAN fundraiser. It's not coming up till the end of July, July 27th, but I want to give people that might be interested in putting a baseball team in the tournament. If I wasn't going to be away fishing, I was going to suggest we put a town council team in. It's their big fundraiser, but you can go out and have a chicken or a steak dinner for $15, or the dinner and the Leo, or the comedy show for the evening for $30. So you got lots of time. That's July 27th, but I have tickets.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bjorkman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a reminder that this Wednesday night, Mark Cullen from Home Hardware, the gardener, will be in McGregor at the McGregor Community Center at 7 o'clock for a meet and greet, as well as a book signing. And this is part of the prize that we won last year for winning a national award with our Communities in Bloom committee. And I don't know if there's anything else there, Mr. Sweet, that we can say about that, other events in the day.
Your worship, so Mr. Collin will be there Wednesday night, so we hope people can come out, but also the following day we're taking them around through all our centers and show them the great things our volunteers have done. So if you're around at any of those, feel free to stop in and photos, but also thank him and also thank the volunteers that are there.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah. Councillor Bondi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick line about our ward meetings that are coming up. June 25th, wards 3 and 4 at the the Colchester Community Center from 7 to 9, and the Wednesday one, June 26th, from 7 to 9 at the Essex Center Sports Complex for wards 1 and 2. any resident can go to any ward meeting. You can go to one, you can go to both. You're, of course, not obligated to go to any. If you have any questions, drop them to your counselor ahead of time, and they can bring the answers to those questions, hopefully. And it's usually a really good time getting to know our residents in an informal, somewhat formal setting and question-answer period, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Dolen.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Councillor Bowman?
Just a couple. First of all, with regard to the Essex Fun Fest, volunteers are really the lifeblood of that festival. So if you can, give them a few hours, and that goes out to anybody that's listening tonight. Anything is appreciated. And the other thing I like to point out is, go Raptors!
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to echo the same thing. We do need volunteers for the Fun Fest, and I'm sure most of the councillors here, if we could just throw in maybe 2 or 3 or 4 hours each, that would really, really help them out. And for me, I just want to give a big, big thanks to all the sponsors that helped me out with the Colchester Fun Day, the fireworks, and we had our steak dinner, and thanks to Councillor Bjorkman. He's the one that prepared all the steaks and got the steaks for us. It was a huge success. I think we did, just in that dinner alone, 9,400, if I'm right there, Doug, 9,400. And I think the figure right now, we're about, 46,000 right in there, with more money to come. So we're way, way above last year. So it's going to be a good event, and any other surplus of money, I think what we'll do, we'll put it away for next year's function, and it looks like I'll probably be putting it on again. But anyways, thanks a lot for all the support.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 17.1, bylaws that require a third and final reading this evening. Bylaw 1826 to confirm the proceedings from the June 3rd, 2019 regular council meeting.
I have a mover, Councillor Bowman, and seconder, Councillor Bjorkman. All in favor? It's carried.
17.2, bylaws for 3 readings this evening. 1803 to provide for financing in the amount of $56,405.28 for Community Services Dump Truck Unit 808 for 3 readings this evening.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Bondi and Councillor Bjorkman. Any questions on this one? All in favor? It's carried.
Bylaw 1830 to amend 1818, being a bylaw to establish tax rates and additional charges for municipal, county, and education purposes for the year 2019, also for 3 readings this evening.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Verbeek and Deputy Mayor Malash. Any questions? All in favor? Carried.
And 17.3 on the agenda for 2 readings. Bylaw 1831 to confirm the proceedings of this June 17th regular council meeting.
Have a mover, please. Councillor Bjorkman and Councillor Guerin. All in favor? It's carried.